Hello and welcome to today's session. Today we begin looking at Edward Albee's very well-renowned play, The Zoo Story. So this has a slightly different flavor from the other works that we had been looking at. It also follows a slightly different tradition, which we will come to know shortly as and when we begin going through this. This is also realist, but with a very intense psychological drama, which also gets enacted as the play progresses. So this is a 1950s work. It was written in 1958 and it premiered in 1959, along with Samuel Beckett's play Krapp's Last Tape. So you do see resonances of the Beckettian tradition over here. You do find resonances, it resonating very well with the Waiting for Godot tradition that Samuel Beckett inaugurated. And you do see that, these sort of continuities also place the American theatre very centrally with the rest of European theatre. And this work from the beginning, it had drawn a lot of attention in terms of the continuities, in terms of the universal themes that it was addressing, though it was in a specific sense rooted within the American dream, though it was rooted within very specific realities. It also had a larger theme which could be expanded across time and space. So which is why, like in 2004, there was a prequel which was written, Edward Albee himself wrote a prequel to The Zoo Story titled Home Life, and it's often now together presented as a play, as a play titled Edward Albee's At Home at the Zoo. Yeah, so we find that this is a play which is very, very malleable in that sense. There is a certain flexibility about it, where there is a before and an after that one can recreate, imaginatively recreate at any point of time in very, very different contexts. So if you look at the kind of plays that we had been looking at, we saw that even in the last play, The Glass Menagerie, where we see that the situations, even while the realities are very rooted in specific situations, in specific locales, you can always take those emotions out of that and place it anywhere else, and which is why these plays continue to speak to us in a very emotional sense, in a very political sense, in a very deeply psychological sense, even after the passing of these many, many decades. So this play, The Zoo Story, had gone on to, it had won a number of accolades, a number of awards, and it continues to be staged and recreated in different forms and in different languages too. So this is a one-act play, and there are only two major characters over here, Jerry and Peter. And Jerry is a very lonely man who could be seen as, a product, a certain forgotten byproduct of the new economy, the new political system, which had got established. And he meets another man, Peter, who's a fairly successful product. So these two are products of the same society. Jerry and Peter are products of the same economic system, but they had come out in two very different ways, that they cannot be placed together at all in any other context, which is why this play, in a rather dramatic way, places them together in a bench, within a zoo, and they are it's in the Central Park, and they are being in a way, Jerry is the character who's forcing Peter to listen to him, and he is on his way back from the visit to the zoo, and the bench in the New York Central Park, that becomes a site which can accommodate both of them together, perhaps the only site which can accommodate them together. There's a lot of discomfort in that positioning, in the way in which they are placed beside each other. It obviously results also in a lot of violence. It leads to a lot of uncomfortable situations, even leading eventually to the death of one of the characters. So this is how this play is staged, and this also draws attention to the kind of disparities in an economic sense, in the worldviews, and also at a very fundamental level, how it becomes very difficult for two people from the same location, but the two people who inhabit totally different realities, how it becomes difficult for them to even have a conversation. So the two major characters are Peter and Jerry. Peter is a successful publishing executive. He's a family man, and we get to know these from the details of the dialogues are mostly in very staccato snippet form. We get these details from that. He's a family man with a wife, 2 daughters, and there are also 2 parakeets, 2 pets that they keep. Jerry is a lonely man. He's poverty stricken. There's hardly anything successful or meaningful about his life. He lives in the Upper West Side of US. It also, exemplifies, it also symbolically shows the kind of differences between these characters. And his loneliness is what compels him to walk up to strangers, strike a conversation, even if that makes them uncomfortable, to the point of, them trying to flee the scene. Yeah, we find that he has these conversations, these random conversations, and tries to seek companionship even from strangers. That's a kind of situation into which a character like Jerry has been driven into. So this is also like the other plays that we have been looking at, this is also a very, very pungent critique of the economic system, of the social system, how it has the power to produce very successful, very individualistic people who are visible, who gain fame as well as fortune. But at the same time, there are these byproducts, the forgotten byproducts of this system, like Jerry, who have nowhere to go, literally nowhere to go, and literally nothing to look forward to. So here we start looking through some of the aspects of this play. The Zoo Story by Edward Albee. So the 2 characters are introduced to us. Peter is a man in his early 40s, Jerry is a man in his late 30s, and their appearances are present in stark contrast to one another, and we'll quickly read through those. Peter is a man in his early 40s, neither fat nor gaunt, neither handsome nor homely. He wears tweeds, smokes a pipe, carries horn-rimmed glasses. Although he's moving into middle age, his dress and his manner would suggest a man younger. Clearly a very sophisticated man who belongs to one of the upper echelons of the society. Jerry, a man in his late 30s, not poorly dressed but carelessly. What was once a trim and lightly muscled body has begun to go to fat. Look at how their bodies are being described, and that description also tells us about the kind of backgrounds that they come from. While he's no longer handsome, it is evident that he once was. How the system takes a toll on how you look, on your appearances, and on the way, the kind of shape that your body acquires and what that reflects of the backgrounds that one comes from. His fall from physical grace should not suggest debauchery. He has to come closest to it, a great weariness. Yeah? So this is happening in Central Park. The scene, it is Central Park, a Sunday afternoon in summer. The present, there are 2 park benches, one towards either side of the stage. They both face the audience. Behind that, foliage trees, sky. At the beginning, Peter is seated on one of the benches. As the curtain rises, Peter is seated on the bench stage right. He's reading a book, stops reading, cleans his glasses, goes back to reading, and Jerry enters. So it's a very uncomplicated image of Peter which is being presented. Very well dressed, sophisticated, successful man who's taking a break on a Sunday afternoon, sitting in the park and trying to read a book. And Jerry enters and starts this conversation very randomly. We'll take a look at the conversation to get a flavor of the kind of tone that this play is trying to set, how the stage is being set for us to get prepared for the action, or rather the non-action that lies ahead. Jerry: I've been to the zoo. Peter doesn't notice. I said I've been to the zoo. Mister, I've been to the zoo. What? I'm sorry, were you talking to me? I went to the zoo and then I walked until I came here. Have I been walking north? North? Why? I think so. Let me see. Is it 5th Avenue? Why, yeah, yes, it is. You can notice, the surprised and almost uncomfortable response from Peter's side. And Jerry starts this conversation without any conversation starters. It just plunges right into it with a very direct question, which perhaps does not even make much sense to Peter. Like, why are they even having this conversation? It also, these markers, the absence of these markers are also about the kind of societies that they come from, the kind of formalities that one expects and the other does not have and does not even know how to display. And what is that cross street there? That one to the right, that's 74th Street. And the zoo is around 65th Street. So I've been walking north. So Peter is anxious to get back to his reading. Yes, it would seem so. good old north, huh? But not due north. Hi, well, no, not due north, but we call it north. It's northerly. Jerry watches as Peter, anxiously to dismiss him, prepares his pipe. Well, boy, you're not going to get lung cancer, are you? So there's a very naive directness about Jerry. There's also concern for a stranger, which is very, very discomforting given the background that Peter comes from. No, sir, not from this. No, sir. What you'll probably get is cancer of the mouth, and then you'll have to wear one of those things Freud wore after they took one whole side of his jaw anyway. What do they call those things? So Peter is clearly uncomfortable with the discussion. A prosthesis, the very thing a prosthesis. You're an educated man, aren't you? You're a doctor. Oh, no, no, I read about it somewhere. Time magazine, I think. Well, Time magazine isn't for blockheads. No, I suppose not. Boy, I'm glad that's Fifth Avenue there. Yes, I don't like the west side of the park much. Oh, why? I don't know. Oh. Jerry stands for a few seconds, looking at Peter, who finally looks up again, puzzled. Yeah? And look at the stubbornness of this man, that a very naive stubbornness of Jerry, which is almost helpless. You begin to feel sorry for this man when he's waiting there to continue the conversation. Do you mind if we talk? Why? No, no. Yes, you do, you do. He puts his book down, his pipe out and away, smiling. No, I don't mind. Yes, you do. No, I don't mind at all, really. It's a nice day. Yes, it is. It is lovely. Yeah. And these are the things, perhaps, in these very nuanced conversation, we also get to know that, perhaps these are the things that Peter had always been not noticing. And these are the only things, perhaps, Jerry finds time to notice. These are the only times, perhaps, that gives any comfort, gives any meaning to Jerry's otherwise very, very uneventful life. I've been to the zoo. Yes, I think you said so, didn't you? You'll read about in the papers tomorrow. If you don't see it on your TV tonight, you have TV, haven't you? There's something very prophetic about it. And we do know that if you've now read through the entire play, you do know that something very, very massive happens towards the end, that, we're fairly certain that the very next day it will feature in the news, and about, how Jerry went to the zoo and then started having a conversation with this man. So why, yes, we have two, one for the children. You're married, and look at the positioning, the mentioning of the TV. There's one additional TV for the children too. It gives us a sense of the background from which he comes. You're married. Why? Certainly. It isn't law, for God's sake. No, of course not. And you have a wife. Yeah. Bewildered by the seeming lack of communication. They clearly come from two very different worlds, where the value systems are different, where the kind of questions that they think it's okay to ask in a public domain, in a public, in the public sphere, it's very, very different. And you have children. Yes, two boys. No, girls, both girls. But you wanted boys. Well, naturally, every man wants a son. Yeah. Here, we also find that the father-son relationship, which we had been seeing in the other plays, that is quite absent over here. This play has a very different background, that it does not let us explore the father-son's relationship, but it does show us a different kind of, a man-to-man relationship over here. How two men are they're unable to have a conversation, but at some level they also understand each other. So Jerry and Peter, though they come from very different backgrounds, they also know about the kind of expectations that a man of Peter's stature would have. For instance, about even in this very brief mentioning of how every man wants a son. Jerry, but that's the way the cookie crumbles. I wasn't going to say that. No, you're not going to have any more kids, are you? No, no more. Why did you say that? How would you know about that? The way you cross your legs, perhaps something in the voice, or maybe I'm just guessing. Is it your wife? And Peter is suddenly furious for obvious reasons, because this is a conversation which is now about to cross all personal boundaries. And this is another thing that we find very significant in this play, that in these very small instances, it tells us a lot about the expectations from different social systems, from different social backgrounds, how a very innocuous, simple question could be seen as crossing the personal boundaries, and it certainly does, and where these sort of conversations take them. That's none of your business. Do you understand? Well, you're right. we'll have no more children. That is the way the cookie crumbles. Yes, I guess so. Yeah. So they seem to be understanding each other too in a very in a very strange sense over here. Well, now what else? What were you saying about the zoo that I'd read about or see? I'll tell you about it soon. Do you mind if I ask you questions? Oh, not really. I'll tell you why I do it. I don't talk to many people except to say, like, give me a beer, or where's the John, or what time does the feature go on, or keep your hands to yourself, buddy, things like that. I must say I don't. But, and now that he's started giving a lot of information, Peter doesn't even know how to stop him. But every once in a while, I like to talk to somebody, really talk, like to get to know somebody, know all about him. Am I the guinea pig for today? And he's also evidently very uncomfortable. On a sun-drenched Sunday afternoon like this, who better than a nice married man with 2 daughters and no, 2 dogs? No dogs? Oh, that's a shame, but you look like an animal man. Cat, but that can't be your idea. No, sir, your wife and daughters, is there anything else I should know? There are 2 parakeets, one for each of my daughters. Birds, my daughters keep them in a cage in their bedroom. Do they carry disease, the birds? I don't believe so. That's too bad. If they did, you could set them loose in the house and the cats could eat them and die, maybe look black. And what else? What do you do to support your enormous household? Yeah. So it clearly does not make much sense to Peter, seeing the way this conversation is growing. I have an executive position at the small publishing house. We publish textbooks. That sounds very nice. What do you make? And Peter's trying to distract. Oh, now look here. Oh, come on. Well, I make $18,000 a year, but don't carry more than $40 at any one time in case you're a hold-up man. Yeah. So they are, they're the fears and the anxieties that he has. He's also putting all of that out there. And Jerry is also, is quite intelligent and he gets where that comes from. Where do you live? Oh, look, I'm not going to rob you and I'm not going to kidnap your parakeets, your cats or your daughters. I live between Lexington and 3rd Avenue and on 74th Street. That wasn't so hard, was it? I didn't mean to seem... It's that you don't really carry on a conversation. You just ask questions and I'm normally reticent. Why do you just stand there? So we find that, the way this conversation is growing, there isn't much scope for a conversation. And we also know that it isn't really about the conversation. It's about 2 people trying to make a connect with each other. Which is why when we are trying to give a summary to this play also, we find that it's just about Jerry, the character, almost a nobody who's intruding into this life of a total stranger who's just sitting on the park bench reading, and very uneventful day turning into something else altogether. So he also begins this question with a very random statement. I've been to a zoo, and then goes on about asking very, very personal, intense questions. So he also narrates these anecdotes from his life, which does not have much of a meaning. So once you begin to read through this play, you will see that in this meaninglessness, in the meaningless conversation, the contextless conversation that he has, that perhaps is the context that the play is trying to set. That is the critique, that is the crux of this entire play in terms of the absence of a context, the absence of meaning, and the need to create it out of nowhere. And also how it ends on a very sad note too, about what happens when you try to create this context, you try to create this meaning out of almost like nowhere. Yeah. So we will wrap up with this note, and I hope you will be able to read through the rest of the play so that the rest of the discussion will also make more sense to us. Yeah, we may not be able to go through the entire play, close read the entire play. We'll focus on certain sections. So it would be very useful if you could go through the play in detail and be familiar with the minute details, so that we can have a larger discussion about the major themes covered and how the larger context makes sense in terms of situating the 20th century American theatre. So I thank you for your time. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next session.